somebody who claims to be Scottish can say that sort of thing, and then you had that article in the Herald last week by that guy who I don't know what nationality he is. It was stunning, completely denigrating the Scottish flag in a way that. And there's some comment about
Mark Smith.
Is he American?
No idea.
Because there was some comment about him going back to America. But if he went to America and even uttered the first two sentences of that article, they would lynch the bastard. It was stunningly crass. It was just unbelievable. But yet what amazes me is they're so stupid they come out with stuff like that. But generally they try and hide it. There's no question. Most of the time they try to hide it.
I mean, cringe. If you're going to cringe at anything, you cringe at the Union Jack, the butcher's apron. Which is probably one of the most horrendous flags ever.
Well, we think that. Most people don't.
No. What other country's press would print that?
No other country.
Without some sort of criticism.
Well, no other country's press would print it. In some countries, you get put in jail for saying it because it would be sedition. In other countries, it would be. It is so laughable. That's why I was so angry last week when I read that stuff. That I said in that email I sent, and I'm totally sick of this country, and I meant the United Kingdom, because Cameron was right before he got elected. This place is broken. There's no question about that. The fact that a national newspaper in Scotland can allow someone to publish an article like that is just unbelievable. No other country on the planet would do that. Denigrate their own country's flag that way. It's just unbelievable.
I think you'll probably find similar in Spain, in areas like the Basque region where people have a go, and in Catalonia.
No. But the point is, nobody in Catalonia would sit there and write an article about Catalonia in a Catalonian newspaper and say the Catalonian flag is a crock of shit and we ought to be ashamed of it. Nobody. Somebody in Madrid might do that.
Yeah, I'm just going to introduce you, but I'll fade this in very differently because you guys are already passionate. Yeah. So this week we have the full crew. We've got Alex Grant, Phil Attridge, Norrie Stewart, myself, Stuart Lockhead. There's no FNQs, so we're just...
no effing what?
No FNQs.
No FNQs.
Sounded like that. There's no FNQs.
You never noticed it before?
No, I haven't.
No.
Oh, I know that. So
the school children are all on half term, I think.
There you go, that's another thing. There are loads of children in the streets. You think, why aren't they at school? And then you realise, no, school half term.
Right.
I was alluding to the school children in the Parliament.
We call them tatty holidays. And the school children now, the Parliament's off for a couple of weeks. We'll be back the very last Thursday of the month with an FNQ.
August a tatty holiday. This isn't a tatty holiday, is it?
Well, I'm going to start my rant with King Charles. Any day now, the Queen should probably proper clogs. Can't go on forever. And King Charles has already staked his position in his public. Today, we know he's been writing and behind the scenes privately, and no FOI request will reveal what he says to all the government ministers. But today, to camera, to the national pensions, whatever they are, whoever pensions providers, he talked to camera and he interfered in politics in the United Kingdom. Now, I remember studying politics, and that was never supposed to happen. Things have changed.
Whose side's he on with this?
I have to admit, I admit that I had empathy with what he was saying about the pensions providers. They're too short term. They're not looking long term, and that's fair enough. But that is not the point. The point is a completely unelected head of state is interfering in the democracy. Now, is that a surprise given what's already going on in this country? No.
Well, I mean, the recent stuff that came out.
But wait a minute. But wait a minute. He's done something shockingly undemocratic. He's talked to camera. It's been published. He looks king-like, presidential. I'm waiting to see what the reaction is of the London media. If they don't scream at him for being a shockingly dangerous tyrant, then I'll be very disappointed.
Well, the Daily Mail will probably come out and say we need to have William because he's a troublemaker. Interesting enough, I've got a slightly different view on this. I agree with you 100% in what you're saying, but funnily enough, Charlie Boy sometimes comes out with the only dissent on subjects that there isn't any dissent on. No one else will dare say it. Now, I haven't seen the detail.
He's a bit extreme on homeopathy.
Well, he is, but I don't really care about that. Am I bothered?
No.
I mean, I'm not bothered. I mean, I don't need a monarchy anyway, but if I've got one, if the most he ever talked about was homeopathy, I couldn't give a monkey's.
Alex's point is I think, relevant. I mean, there is nobody is saying it. I mean, the pension set up in this country is absolutely criminal. You go to Holland, you get 50% more for the same money. Why? Because you don't get charged an annual handling charge. You don't get this, you don't get that, you don't get the next thing. All you have to do is sort out the pensions, and we don't have a pension deficit in private pensions.
It's always been criminal. I mean, the fact is, you know, we've got the lowest state pension in Europe. This wonderful country, you know, that we have, this wonderful, bastion of democracy. It's a crock of shit. And you know, as somebody who was in a private pension scheme, fortunately for me, although interestingly enough, it's ended up in the pension protection fund, but that's another story. But if you move from one company to another and you switch, the idea that if you put £1 into that pension scheme, you then move companies, you put £1 into that pension scheme, you get hammered for it. You know, the fact, if you stayed in one company and you for 10 years and you put 10 quid in, you get much more value than if you move from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and put the same amount of money away.
Okay, but just before...
It's a joke.
Sorry, just a minute. This notion of pensions, private company pensions, I mean, obviously I started working in a world that's like that. Bank of Scotland, this American company, Wickman Lang, pensions, superannuation. They depended entirely on the liquidity and the success of the company. If the company went bust, goodbye. And yet people bought into this idea. As part of my salary, part of what I get, the remuneration, I get this superannuation. It was never secured. If the company went bust, your pension went bust.
But this is just part of the UK. Everything in the UK, compared to mainstream Europe, is at best second class. Second class pensions, as we're having a look. Second class housing. Second class, a lot of the, education, definitely, where I had used the term stupid, but the most uneducated people in Europe. The list is actually endless of what we don't do.
Calls me uneducated again, I'm going to know.
Never mind.
But generalising.
Makes good television, by the way.
No, in Scotland you've got about, I think it's somewhere in the region of 88% literacy. 20% of Scots are functionally illiterate and innumerate. It's probably one of the reasons why they can get sold duff pensions, because they can't really work anything out, they can't read, and all you've got to do is stick Prince Jug ears up and they believe anything.
What do you think costs the government more? Private pensions or the public sector?
I should imagine private.
The public sector, I don't understand that question.
Well, your
taxes
policemen, your firemen,
taxes all come in to pay for that.
All the pensions that are paid for by local government and government, what do you think costs them more?
Well, it won't be local government because most of those are actually in the
strangely
black.
enough, they pay as much to private pensions as they pay to public pensions, because you get all your tax rebates, etc., etc. When they don't make a profit, the government tops them up. Now, I came across this on the internet.
I was not private pension, that's not true.
Oh, I'm sorry, they do.
No, they don't.
If you have a shortfall...
No, they don't.
Oh, they do.
Look, I'm a pension trustee.
I'm not talking about you going down the tubes here.
No, I'm a pension trustee. Be a bit careful here. You are correct in the tax relief that the government has given to private pension schemes is enormous. It's not as good as it was because Gordon Brown made it so easy for people with a lot of money to put a huge amount of money into their pension without and getting a huge amount back in tax. And I can give you the example, I'm a trustee on what is left of my company's pension scheme, which has gone into the pension protection fund. When the company went bust in effect, and the deficit is picked up by nobody except the pension insurance fund, the pension protection fund. They have to pick that up and guarantee a certain amount of it, but the company was paying the government a fee, an insurance policy, so that if they went bust, the government had to pick up. Now, if what you're saying, Norrie,
No.
is the government has to pick up the problem, you're right, it
no,
does,
no,
but they don't subsidise it.
I'm not talking about failures.
Well, they don't subsidise it.
I'm talking on a day-to-day,
No, they don't.
annual. They do.
No, they don't. How the hell do you know that?
Could I interject
Oh,
here? Could I interject? We have a distinct.
There you go. Okay, well let's
Well,
can you arbitrate, Phil? Can you tell
Well,
the difference?
basically, yes, no, no, yes, right. To be continued and clarified at the next noise. Otherwise, we'll be going yes, no, no,
There's somebody
yes.
on a bike in your hall, by the way. What's that bell that keeps ringing?
Goodness knows, somebody's phone is dinging.
It's not
It's
mine.
not mine's turned down, so and this is turned down, so we don't know. It doesn't even matter. It's only a bell. Right now, today is the start of the SNP annual conference.
Yeah.
Now we've had wall-to-wall coverage of the Lib Dems, the Tories, who've only got one MP in Scotland, the Labour Party conferences. I was actually quite surprised we didn't get wall-to-wall of
You
UKIP.
mean we're not getting wall to wall of the SNP? Well,
No,
now that is a big surprise.
I was expecting wall-to-wall of UKIP, but he was just on every week. Didn't matter what the party was.
Right.
He was on. Nigel Farage was on. Where's the wall-to-wall coverage of the SNP? Why can't the BBC in Scotland provide the same equal coverage that we've had over the last 3 weeks of those parties
Well,
that
they can.
including two parties that are minor parties in Scotland?
Daft question. They can, but they don't want to. End of. Good.
Where is the corruption? There's corruption at the
Oh
top.
no! It's not.
Complete at the top
it's
of the media.
No, corruption's the wrong word. It's contempt and indifference.
No,
It's not corruption.
No, it's much more positive than indifference. If you read Bateman's comments about Boothman, you know why we don't get coverage. And as Stuart and I were discussing earlier before we started this, there's no doubt in my mind the SNP are apoplectic about it. But if they try to do something about it, they will be accused of political interference in the media.
Well,
I mean, the fact that Bateman could write what he said, and nobody says anything about that. Can you imagine James Naughtie retiring from the BBC and writing a blog about the corruption within the BBC?
Mm-hmm.
It would be headline stuff all across the media in London. But the fact that Bateman said the Labour Party, Sinclair phones up and says to his pal Boothman, I don't think you should say that, you should say this, and by the way, I'll see you down the pub in a minute, and that's what they do. Yeah. It's a complete stitch-up.
Boothman's a part of Labour Party apparatus, given he's Susan Deacon's husband. So.
That's not exactly what.
Wait a minute. I'm just going to throw this. I'm not going to stop you completely. But bear in mind that the media in Scotland is all in Glasgow. It's focused entirely on Glasgow, and Glasgow has been this core heart of Labour in Britain, almost the UK.
Yeah.
Bateman's really saying that it's not a journalistic plot. That it's
It's an old boys' network.
It's about management and lack of funding and too much pressure and blah blah blah. It's bad journalism because they don't have the time or the resources. That's what he's saying. What he's basically saying is management is quite happy to go with news releases from Better Together or whatever.
Yeah, but then...
What he's not saying is a bias. All he's saying is that the way it's fallen out, the guy at the top done it. Now that might not be accidental. It might be, well, this will happen if we give him the job.
Yeah,
that might be the case, but Bateman's never said it was bias.
Well, Bateman's a bit careful with his words, but at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, he inferred that if the Labour Party phoned Boothman, they got what they wanted. If the SNP phoned Boothman, they got jack shit.
But that was in the context of when Boothman was a reporter, he was the go-to guy to get information on what was happening within the Labour Party. So all his contacts were at one time useful. They are now a drag on good journalism.
And Boothman, of course, is married to
Susan Deacon's husband.
Yeah, well, look, we can pontificate on this till the cows come home. You can play the Peter Curran role that says, the BBC ain't biased. The BBC is categorically, unequivocally biased. I don't believe the journalists are biased. I went to an event in the Scottish Parliament during the festival, run by the Edinburgh, Society, about the media, and the big lad who took Bateman's job on a Saturday, Sunday morning, he was actually quite a good reporter. Bateman actually complimented him quite recently. He was sat 2 rows in front of me, nodding his head at at the comments that were being made by the likes of Ruth Wishart and at least one other person.
Well, she's an icon of the establishment, but she's a dissenting voice.
She's a great dissenting voice. I mean, this discussion about the media had Brian Wilson, Ruth Wishart, the guy who used to run, whose name escapes me, he used to run BBC, I think Radio Scotland, then went off to run Radio 4, who's Scottish, and an English bloke. And Ruth Wishart, who wasn't a media expert, made some very pertinent, critical comments about the media in Scotland. But the person, amazingly, and this does my bloody head in, the person who stood there and said, well, of course Scotland should have its own broadcasting system, of course Scotland should do this, of course, he was the English guy. And he was absolutely wonderful. And the complete contrast was this bloke who claims to be a loyal Scotsman, Mr. Wilson from the Highlands, who founded the West Highland Press and tries to pretend he's a real person, basically stood there and said, well, it ain't broke, why do you want to fix it?
Right, now understand, right, I'm going to come in here because, right, England, we've all got good, experience of England. And now in England, let's just talk about radio. Every single county in England, there's BBC Radio Wiltshire, BBC Radio Somerset, BBC Radio Lincolnshire, BBC Radio Nottinghamshire. Every tin pot county in England has got its own BBC radio station, and it's a big
it's called BBC Radio Scotlandshire.
It's more than an opt-out, by the way. You come to Scotland, where's BBC Edinburgh? Where's BBC Aberdeen?
Why?
All we get is BBC Glasgow.
Why would you? It's a colonial.
Why do you need that?
And all you need
There is no city.
overarching.
There is no city in England that doesn't have a BBC radio station.
Fine.
And yet Scotland is regarded as just
Well, you're not in
BBC
England.
Glasgow. We can control the whole country by
You're not in England, they
manage
can
BBC
right
Glasgow.
You're not in England.
You're in England. That's
You're
why.
Northern Britain. Learn your place.
And the reason why you've got that is there is no dissenting voice with a public forum to criticise it, because anybody who stands up and criticises that does it in front of 200 people, and the rest of the media won't talk about it.
There was a
And if you're
classic
looking
last week on the television, the weather zone, and I'm not really paying attention. I'm just going to do that. And the guy's on there, and it's going to rain on London, and it's not going to rain on Wales, and Northern Ireland will be all right, but it's going to be very wet and cold in North Britain.
That's because he can't be bothered.
Does he mean sort of Carlisle and
Oh, Newcastle.
Newcastle.
or does he mean Scotland? What does he mean North Britain?
Well,
It's
North
that
Britain, well,
way.
we are Northern Britain because it is
If he'd said
British
Northern,
Isles. It is
if
Britannia.
he'd said Northern,
Oh yeah.
Or if it said
he
North.
said North Britain. And
If
I
it
thought,
said North
"Well,
Great
it's
Britain,
North
if it said North Great Britain, we would have understood it's an island. But again, that's an abused. What about the number? Well, let's.
Can we just stay on the BBC just for
I'm
a
not
moment?
staying with that.
No.
Come back in. Have you noticed the amount of programmes that are coming on the BBC about
Not
Great British, the Great British Bake Off, the Great British everything? It is non-stop.
You think it's an accident?
Nationalism.
You think it's an accident?
No.
No.
I wrote it in
do
my
you know-
diary in June last year. I was arguing with Jill. I said, well, there you go. I'm going to write this down. You watch a number of programmes about what a great country Britain is. Britain.
But have you? The English are the English, and they've always been the English. The rest of you are the British. Get used to it. Unless, of course, next year you decide to actually do something about it. But sticking on the BBC, and we're talking there about not covering the SNP conference or anything else, because they can't afford it, they've not got any money, you're too small, you're too daft, all the rest of it.
It's not that reason. It's
No,
They don't
three and a
want
half.
the-
It's about
they
three and a
give them the
half
publicity.
£1 billion a year. I think they collect in
In license.
license fees.
Yeah,
all the rest
but
of
that's
it.
for Coronation
Scotland,
Street.
Scotland is due to go down to around 80 million for BBC
Yeah, that's
this budget,
yeah.
whereas it should be getting 350 million.
No,
then you
no.
could cover everything.
No.
Maybe about
Of
300.
course you
because they're only
shouldn't.
eight.
Of course you shouldn't. As he just alluded to. That's to pay for EastEnders, so that we can watch fucking EastEnders.
It's to pay for the opium for the masses.
And the open for the masses are the soaps, because the public, there's an awful lot of people who will be voting next year on the independence referendum. If they're scared that they're going to lose their soaps, they'll vote no,
Yeah.
simply for that reason alone.
But we all watch soaps as well. They call them Newsnight for Scotland. And actually, the way they run,
And
they're also...
and the other thing, I watched on Sky Scotland winning 2-0, and then the news came on. I switched on to the TV of Sky. I switched on to the BBC, and the news came on, and England won 2-0. And at the opening bit, they switched to reporting Scotland, and we had that lassie that I think Bateman made some fairly oblique derogatory remarks about. The lassie, I think she's from Aberdeen.
Is it Bill?
No, the dark-haired lassie. She's a very attractive lassie.
Don't know her.
But she does the news quite regularly. So we went to Reporting Scotland, and they talked about, Deed Dug up tree and a few other things. The fact that the Scottish football team had just won 2-0 against the 10th rated country in the world wasn't even referred to. Now, if somebody cares to tell me that's an accident, I'm a bleeding China.
I agree with you entirely. I mean, I noticed that the other night. You're watching, watching the news, or was it yesterday morning, breakfast news. England won last night. Big deal, right? For 5 minutes, we got all the detail about the game, all the goals, all this the next thing. Scotland score right at the end. Just mentioned nothing at all. Just because they're not even giving a sop to the existence.
And the other thing, on the Today programme the following morning, James Naughtie interviews the English football manager, congratulating him about his wonderful victory the previous night, and then what does he do? He makes the classic Scottish cringe remark about, well, it's just a shame about Scotland, isn't it? And then, having said it, 2 seconds later, he made some oblique reference as though the English bloke had brought it up. I mean, why the English blokes wouldn't want to bring it up anyway? Why should he? Why should he give a monkeys about what happens to Scotland? But this Scottish cringe merchant actually makes this comment, and I've heard the other major Scottish cringe merchant on 5 Live do exactly the same thing.
What's his face? That guy from Edinburgh.
Aye. I mean, they're all at it, they love it. They have to make this cringe observation. Instead of,
Look, let me just point out to viewers and
Can I just make a wee...
Oh, it's your turn,
no, just a wee... Yeah, well, I'll maybe get a word in next week. Just a wee remark on that.
Here for a week.
Oh, no. Yeah, I know. No, but it's listening now. And I mean, it's just paraphrasing Harold Wilson. Just because you sound paranoid doesn't mean you're not right.
Correct. That's
but
true.
No,
any chance that we can just nip south of the border for a minute?
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about.
That's where I've been. Go for it.
Yeah, right. No, and it's Red Ed's new cabinet reshuffle. I think most people...
Most people have yawned at that.
Yeah, but it's this whole way it's being portrayed. But it's also a new direction, and I think we'll all agree that the Tories on welfare are evil, wicked, nasty, the things they're doing. And then you've got this new boring...
What, you mean looking after hard-working people?
Yes. And we do have this now, already been labelled, this new boring shadow minister for work and pensions, who says we're going to be tougher. So what I want to know is, do you think they'll drag them out of their wheelchairs and kick their heads in when they go to Atos?
Probably, yeah.
Or something like that. And then we have Mr. Hunt. That's 2 of them, almost a shower.
No, he's a Tory.
Well, he's carrying on, because this is, again, because it's pertinent to Scotland and where we're going to go with education. But he's carrying on with, looks like selection, faith schools and everything else, no comprehension, and we've already been told that we're the most illiterate, innumerate country in Europe. And why aren't we looking at Finland, which everybody does, where start school at 7, you don't get your first test till 10 years later, it's fully comprehensive, and they're the smartest, sharpest people in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
Why is Red Ed doing this?
But they also pay their teachers like they're professional people.
Yeah, they get higher tax, but then again, if you're paying taxes,
teaching in Finland is what teaching used to be when I was a boy. It's a highly respected. I wouldn't say it was necessarily particularly well paid when I was a boy, but in Finland, it's very well paid. Most of the teachers, as I understand it, have got master's degrees, which isn't a bad thing. I don't mind.
Well, they're well educated,
but they're very well educated. They're very highly regarded, very well paid, and their kids produce the best results in the OECD, QED. What does Gove want to do? Gove goes off to Sweden, picks up something that the Swedes tried and then dumped as a failure, and then had the temerity to tell the English, well, we picked up the Swedish free schools idea. I presume thinking he could say, well, it's Swedish, so it's good, because a lot of people think Scandinavia has got lots of good
Nah, but there's one hole in the middle of Scandinavia at the moment, and that is Sweden. Sweden's had a right-wing government for longer than it's ever, in recent years, than it's ever had in the last 50 or 60.
Yeah, but they're waking up to it. They're waking up to it also as well with Gove, and it's the scariest bit when you talk about the qualifications of teachers. That in England, they're not refilling teachers' places; they're getting classroom assistants.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
but
they've also got second-rate police. We don't have them in Scotland. I don't know what they're called in England.
Second-rate.
Police community support officers. Or
Yeah.
something?
Don't we have them up here?
No,
yeah,
we
we do, but they're just a chasing.
Yeah, but
back
I don't.
dogs.
No, wait
a minute.
Not really, do we?
Well,
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
hang on a minute,
That's what
guys.
the
Not to the
guys are with
extent.
the
We don't have them to the extent that they have.
No,
Wait a minute, one at a time.
Well, we've
Yeah.
got part-time police up here,
Yeah.
specials.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially.
we're not
we've-
talking special. We're
and
talking
we've got-
full-time, but not fully qualified cops.
One minute,
And
one minute. And we've got the guys who chase you if your dog shits on the pavement.
Now,
Oh,
they're
that's
council.
environment.
They
Right,
were
let's
council.
go. Let's go back.
We
Let's
have
go.
something
control.
between a special.
But they're under
wait,
the control of the police.
Nobody can understand what you're saying.
Hang
One
on,
at a time. Phil's.
In England, they have
Closer to
something in between that.
It's a PCSO. And they talk
Proper
about it
traffic,
all the
yeah,
time.
proper traffic warden, environmental, how would you do it? Yeah, people that can impose fines and that on you. I mean, really, you can't have two community support officers arresting you. You have to have a real
You have to have a real
policeman
policeman.
there. I mean, they're basically there to wander around the streets. They wear the same uniform, except you see that they have
They got a blue bit on.
they have a, but most people will just see. A
Yeah, but look, hang on. Look, let's go back to where this
Getting itchy.
conversation started. It started in
Probably a good
education.
line.
However, I don't personally have a problem with saying that you can supplement a core of expertise with a less expert group of people, assuming your game isn't to get rid of the qualified people and substitute them with unqualified people.
Called dilution.
Now, well, and okay, there's an interesting question about how far you go with dilution. I mean, if you talk to my wife, who's a deputy head in England, she would tell you that classroom assistants are an asset, and the combination of qualified teachers who are held significantly to account, by the way. When you listen to Gove, you would think they basically do what the hell they like and they're a bunch of useless bastards. But classroom assistants are a very good asset within the school that she operates, and I'm damn certain she could make a case. I mean, if you change the balance to 75% of the people in the classroom were classroom assistants, it'd be crazy. But the fact is, you do it. The thing I find interesting that nobody, because I read the English media, because I don't have much choice other than to read the English media, because there ain't any Scottish media, nobody challenges the fact. You know what Gove has done in privatising English schools? He actually, on the one hand, he's holding teachers who are qualified in the public sector to huge account and criticising them as a useless bunch of numpties, and then he says, you want to set up a private school? That's fine. Do you need, what sort of teachers do you need? You can get a wifey from the local fish and chip shop. She doesn't have to be qualified. You can set up a free school and have it full of unqualified people teaching kids.
You made the point. And it wasn't
It's a
the news.
disgrace.
It wasn't the news today.
And also as well, there's the really scary thing about it, because they've now started to creep into that non-denominational thing they call in Scotland, which is just really Protestant schools in disguise. And are these loonies from America?
come
These
on.
nutters from
Hey,
America?
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Protestant schools in disguise.
Beauty
Everybody,
grenade there.
look,
No, you're not getting away with that.
no, everybody else goes to a non-denominational school. It's only if you've got a particularly strong, powerful religion that you have a special school.
Apart from Catholics and Muslims.
Yeah.
Everybody else goes to
Everybody
a
else goes to a
non-denominational school.
non-denominational
That's
school.
Protestant
That's
school.
why, like when my daughter was at a non-denominational school, in a street that had 7 different churches in it, when it came to different Christian Christmas, Easter, all that, straight down to the Church of Scotland. So much for non-denominational.
Right.
That's
right.
not the way. It's
Well,
not the way it is
sorry,
The
today.
Church of Scotland is the established church
It's not
in
the way it is
Scotland.
today.
It's a
Yeah.
Protestant state,
Yeah.
so non-denominational state
Right.
schools are.
How
Oh, no, I don't
many
agree with you.
ministers? How many ministers teach in non-denominational schools?
No idea. You don't get
How many priests and nuns teach in Catholic schools?
In the 13 years I was in, none.
Well, that's very unusual.
None of the NUN.
That's very unusual.
No, no Batman's friends at all. No.
Nori, you've been very quiet. Is there anything on your mind before we get
Well,
closed?
one of the
That's a good one, yeah.
biggest worries that came about this week was this move from 1% of private beds
To 49%.
in NHS hospitals to
Unbelievable.
49. From a Scottish perspective, that's potentially half the Barnett formula slice for our NHS gone. If those beds are taken up,
By the private sector,
a
then the
huge chunk of the Barnett going to go.
because we get consequentials, we get a percentage
Yeah.
of what
And
English
most
hospitals get.
people don't understand that.
No, because
Well-
there's nobody to give them the information.
But 49%. Why are they in the Labour Party not screaming?
Because
for
they're
because
playwrights.
Because they started
They
it.
started
They
it.
started it.
That's half the NHS. But potentially.
You're still forgetting that the Labour Party is not
No.
the one you supported as a young man.
No.
And they're all obsessed with the Americanisation of everything, or the corporatisation of everything,
Well,
which is what we do.
no,
Everything will
guys,
end up being
guys.
owned by corporate.
Guys, this should be getting screamed.
Well, the whole attack on the NHS should be getting screamed about. They said they weren't going to touch it. It appeared before
Oh, I
the
remember
2010 election that the Tories were shit scared that if they said anything about the NHS, they wouldn't get elected. The minute they got elected, they've done it, and none of the media aren't saying anything about
Cameron's words. No top-down reorganisation.
it. And that's exactly what he did.
Well, sorry, he's a Tory. He's a lying bastard.
Well,
I
we
mean,
know
it's
that.
a given. It's
Yeah,
given.
we
Hey,
know
that's a
that.
good line. Gentlemen, we could go on forever, but we're already over 30 minutes, and normally 23 minutes is the
Limit.
limit.
Most people can
Podcast
put on
should run
Should I
out.
just make one observation?
No, you
about-
can't.
Just one very
you-
short
you-
observation.
you had the best-
No, I'll say it anyway.
You had the best bad line a minute ago.
Yeah.
If you wanted to talk about it, it better be good, sir.
Oh no, yeah, it's fine.
Can I say?
No, you just said it there about the Tories being scared and everything. And when you actually look at how uneducated people on this whole island are and everything else, the Tories have just gone, bing, we can tell them what we like. Because
Yes,
they're
Phil.
stupid, they'll believe it.
You're speaking from a Labour Party perspective there. Gentlemen, it's been a fun.
And the Labour Party aren't doing
I'm
the
sorry,
same thing.
they were believing everything that the last new
It's
Labour
It's been
government
a
said.
fun morning.
Now, let's just say one final thing. It says everything about the British media, how feeble and pathetic they are. As I've said to you before, when I watched your man from The Guardian being interviewed by Kirsty Wark about 10 days ago, he eviscerated her.
Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald
American.
said to Kirsty Wark, isn't it about time, if you're a proper journalist, you actually question some of the things that government tell you? I mean, Greenwald was fantastic.
Well, and then
the
Max
British
Kaiser.
media is shit.
Now, Max Kaiser's, the Kaiser report on Russia Today in American, his highest audience in the world is in the UK.
Right. It's not surprising.
And as he said, the UK is corrupt.
Yeah, he's right.
Good night,
yeah.
and thank you very much, gentlemen, and goodbye.